This is your government video on gerrymandering and Supreme Court requirements. Gerrymandering is a term, a negative term, used for when states redraw the district lines of their states to favor certain groups. In the past, prior to the civil rights movement, the South often used racial gerrymandering to try to limit Black and Latino voter turnout. Today, gerrymandering is specifically used to favor certain political parties and restrict voter turnout for other political parties, and it is still totally legal to do this. One of the effects of gerrymandering is that the party that's in power in the state legislature, because they get to redraw the district lines, they draw them so that their party stays in power, and that the other party has very limited chances or a more difficult time getting people elected. They can also draw district lines around safe seats, which means that current incumbents, people that are currently elected, they can draw the lines around neighborhoods that they know will continue to vote for that particular candidate, thus increasing the incumbency advantage that incumbents already have a more likely chance of winning. It also makes it very, very difficult to challenge. One of the reasons that a lot of people don't step up and decide to run for the House of Representatives is because to pose a challenge to an incumbent is very difficult. In the House of Representatives, incumbents win 90% of the time. So as a challenger, you have to be super well known, you have to be independently wealthy, or you have to be very well supported by all sorts of different outside interest groups, wealthy people, PACs, interests, corporations. Sometimes gerrymandering also created very strangely shaped districts. If you're really trying to work hard to limit voter turnout of one group, you might have to move your lines all across the state in order to group certain neighborhoods together. And this ultimately can create majority-minority districts if you're trying to create a district around a certain racial group, income group, or political party. Because various racial groups tend to vote one way or the other, it is very easy to say that you're drawing a district so that it has a majority of Democrats or liberal households, but that might also be a racial neighborhood, like a Black or Latino neighborhood, that also happens to vote more for Democratic candidates. So sometimes they can gerrymander these districts so that it's a majority of a minority, whether that be a racial minority or a political minority. So over time, because the gerrymandering of lines was used specifically to limit voter turnout, the Supreme Court has made some various requirements. Today, all of the districts within the state have to be equal in population, and this is due to a Supreme Court decision called Baker versus Carr, which is known as the one man, one vote principle. Prior to this, a lot of states had their voting districts equal in geographic size, and that over-supported rural areas, which had a lot of land but not a lot of people. So Baker versus Carr now says they have to be equal in population when they draw the state legislative districts, and within a 10-year period before the next census, if population has shifted within the state, they also have to shift the district lines to adjust for that. Baker versus Carr also corrected this overrepresentation of rural interests in the House. The rural interests still generally have more total power in the House compared to big urban districts, partially because smaller states with only one representative tend to have much smaller populations, and so their citizen to representative ratio tends to be higher. The lines also have to be contiguous, which means they have to connect. You can't have pockets of District 1 all over the state. If you're trying to connect voting populations, ideally you want to connect neighborhoods that would vote similarly. And if you connect all those people, the chances that they like the person that they're electing, that they all get along, that the person represents all of their constituents well, is better. So in order to do that, however, your lines have to be connecting, and sometimes that means you're going to get some weirdly shaped districts. Today, racial gerrymandering is prohibited, and that was banned in the Shaw versus Reno decision in 1993. Originally, they banned racial gerrymandering, but one of the problems that was happening by the 90s was that states were starting to draw districts to allow more Black and Latino voters in certain areas to get some more representation, because prior to the civil rights movement, the lines had been gerrymandering to stop voter turnout from those groups. So in Shaw versus Reno, they went back and said you can draw lines based on race. It just can't be the only requirement. Race can be one of many factors as to why you draw the lines or put them in a certain place.